Dave Hackenberg, a beekeeper since 1962, can usually tell what killed his bees just by looking at them. If they're lying on the ground in front of a hive, it's probably pesticides, he says. If the bees are deformed and wingless, it's probably vampire mites. But last fall, Hackenberg saw something he had never seen before. Thousands of his bee colonies simply disappeared. He was in Florida at the time, pulling the lids off some of his commercial hives. To his horror, they were all empty.
Before farming was introduced into Scotland, people lived by hunting, fishing, and gathering wild foodstuffs. This way of life meant that they usually didn't settle permanently in one place, but were to an extent nomadic, moving about in search of a livelihood, perhaps returning to the same places at certain times of the year. It is believed that the islands of Orkney were known to these people, but so far only a few flint tools have been found to verify this. This is because coastal erosion has destroyed many ancient sites, and these may have contained relics of some of these earliest pioneering colonists.
Heart and blood vessel diseases still kill more people, not only in this country, but also worldwide than everything else combined, and yet it's completely preventable for almost everybody. It's not only preventable, it's actually reversible, and for the last almost 29 years, we've been able to show that by simply changing diet and lifestyle, using these very high-tech, expensive, state-of-the-art measures to prove how powerful these very simple and low-tech and low-cost interventions can be, like quantitative arteriography before and after a year and cardiac PET scans. We showed a few months ago, we published the first study showing that you can actually stop or reverse the progression of prostate cancer by making changes in diet and lifestyle. Now, there is an epidemic of obesity, 2/3 of adults and 15% of kids. What's really concerning to me is that diabetes has increased 70% in the past 10 years, and this may be the first generation in which our kids live a shorter lifespan than we do. That's pitiful, and it's preventable.
You've all probably heard about zoning laws, but many people are confused about what they are. So I'd like to cover them now. Local governments such as cities and counties typically pass zoning laws. They regulate how people use the land in certain parts of the city or country. Think about our city for a moment. It's divided into various districts. Some are commercial while others are residential. This isn't accidental. It's intentional. The city developed this way because of zoning laws. You see, in the commercial district, there are businesses, and in the residential district, there are houses and apartments. You can't open a factory in the residential district, and you can't erect an apartment building in the commercial district. You can't do these things because of zoning laws. There are actually quite a number of zones. As I just stated, there are residential and commercial zones. There are also industrial, agricultural, and recreational zones. Industrial zones are for factories and other manufacturers. Agricultural zones are for farms, and recreational zones are for parks, lakes, and sporting facilities. So why do we need these zones? Well, think of it like this. Would you like a factory located right next to your house? How about a huge farm next to the shopping mall downtown? Or what about a big warehouse with lots of trucks next to the park? Yeah, that's what I thought. And that's why we have zoning laws. They keep various buildings or businesses out of places where they don't belong.
We've all heard the old saw about women who let themselves go after getting married. Well, female ticks take this post-honeymoon weight gain to extremes. After mating, female ticks in the family Ixodes increase their mass an astonishing 100 times, ballooning from the size of a sand grain to that of a kidney bean. This post-copulatory growth spurt is actually an important part of the tick's whole blood-sucking lifestyle. Female ticks need to fully engorge before they can lay eggs, but virgins are better off staying small so they'll have more time to find a mate. Not that male ticks have anything against full-bodied females, it's just that ticks meet their matches while they're hanging around on their host, and if unwed females become too unwieldy, they're more likely to get knocked off during a good grooming. As to what spurs the females to really bulk up, Ruben Kaufman of the University of Alberta finds that male tick semen contains proteins that trigger engorgement. Vaccines against these proteins could keep ticks from reproducing and transmitting infections such as Lyme disease. That would be good news for people, but bad news for female ticks who dream of being engorgeous. Thanks for the minute. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Steve Mirsky. Got a minute? For some reason, every year a few dozen runners dash from southern Italy all the way to the North Cape of Norway in what's called the Trans-Europe Foot Race. It takes about 2 months to cover the almost 2,800 miles, about 45 miles a day. In the 2009 edition, 44 of the 66 participants allowed themselves to be examined medically throughout. The findings were presented November 29th at the annual meeting of the Radiological Society of North America in Chicago, and some of the discoveries may be of use to the less ambitious among us. Muscle volume of the legs actually went down 7% because of the incredible energy consumption of the daily distances, and some leg injuries were found to be safe to run through. It was okay to keep going with simple leg muscle inflammation, for example, but other overuse injuries like joint inflammation carried a greater risk of worsening. Runners lost 40% of their body fat in the first half of the race and 50% altogether. Beginning runners can likewise expect to see a rapid fat loss at first, and you get to stop before reaching Norway. Thanks for the minute. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Steve Mirsky.
Today we're going to talk some more about architecture and what makes for a good design. There are, of course, a whole range of qualities that most architects would like their buildings to possess. One of these is the durability of the building. Architects must consider how well the building will stand up to the ravages of climate and time. Will it remain robust and in good condition? Clearly, requirements will vary according to the surroundings of the building in question. A design that is suitable for Dubai will have different needs from one for Moscow. Then, of course, it's essential to consider the appearance of the building. Regardless of what its purpose may be, will people find pleasure in looking at it? An original and still respected writer on architecture, the Roman Vitruvius, wrote in the 1st century that a building should delight people and should raise their spirits. Again, tastes may vary from one society to the next, but the principle remains the same.
All domestic dogs belong to a single species that descended from wolves, despite vast differences in size, appearance, behavior, and temperament among breeds. While dogs first became domesticated tens of thousands of years ago, the breeds we know today are largely the result of selection for certain traits by humans over the past several hundred years.
We have an enormous amount of diversity within the same species, and we can rarely observe such diversity in nature. So it's a wonderful system to understand how evolution works within a short period of time.
Evolutionary biologist Laszlo Garamszegi of the Institute of Ecology and Botany in Hungary. He says that our playing with dogs is a key component of the human-canine bond.
If you are unsure of drawing directly in pen and ink, start off with a light pencil sketch. This will allow you to make sure that your proportions are correct and that you are happy with the composition. Take a few minutes to study your subject, this chair and violin. Notice how the straight lines of the chair differ from the curves of the violin. Once you are ready to begin drawing, define the shape of the chair with clean straight lines. Then add contrast by drawing the outline of the violin with gently curved lines. You may have to apply more pressure to the nib when drawing curved lines to allow the ink to flow easily. When you have drawn the outlines of both objects, add in the finer details, such as the seat of the chair and the violin strings. Suggest the texture of the woven seat by using light and dark strokes of the pen.
The first 2 years of a baby's life are critical for brain development. In this study, parents were given video-based tips on how best to interact with their babies according to their particular needs. By the age of 3, the baby still had some developmental difficulties, but their social skills had improved, and 2/3 fewer met the criteria for a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder compared to babies who received standard care. The research charity Autistica said the study was promising, and people should not have to wait for a diagnosis for support to be provided. But the National Autistic Society said autism was not a disease that should be cured or lessened. The research team says longer-term studies on more babies using the technique are now needed.